How conscious are you then, in terms of audiences, from a fan engagement perspective, are you when commentating on a game?
I think you always have to be aware of the audience. You are catering towards them, but you have to kind of still stick to what you believe is the best way of doing things. You mentioned storytelling there, and that's absolutely the key to everything we do.
Yeah.
There is a story behind every game, and it doesn't matter what game you have, whether you've got El Clasico, whether you've got Barnet against Stevenage, whatever it is, there's a story there. So I think that's a really important thing with the COCOM. And it's very topical at the moment to talk about whether top level experience is necessary to make you a really good COCOM. And whether caps are important and whether, what your level of experience
Yeah.
is. I have a real issue with that. Just based on my experience of working with COCOMs down the years, I've found that actually some of the most really interesting, engaging, cerebral COCOMs are guys that had a good career. Yulia Simic, who was a great player, she's a brilliant COCOM.
Welcome to Football Business Television. This week, I'm delighted to be joined for the latest edition of Let's Get Engaged by renowned broadcaster Kevin Hatchard. Kevin, how are we?
Yeah, great to be with you.
Appreciate you taking the time. We'll jump straight in. You're a very well-known voice, certainly around Europe, and maybe best known for your work around German football, which I've always been a pretty big fan of. As a commentator, when did you realise, I guess, that you're not just describing the game, but shaping kind of how fans experience it?
Yeah, I think you realise that early on. I mean, I made the decision that I wanted to at least try this really early on, like 13, 14. And I think if
Okay.
I go back to how I felt, watching games, listening to games on the radio, it had that excitement. It had that kind of magic about it. And it was about on radio painting that picture for people who couldn't see the game. On TV, it was obviously a different skill. It was about adding to what people can already see.
Yeah.
And nothing drives me mad more than hearing people on TV talk about where the ball is. I can see that. Don't
Yeah.
worry about that bit. I can see that bit. So yeah, I think that spark from commentary, I think goes back to then from when I was a kid and when I was listening to, Barry Davis or some of the guys on Five Live in the early days
Mm.
and Talk Sport as well. And I think that kind of, set the pattern for me. I think the more you do it, the more you realize the responsibility of the job, really, in the sense that I still like to think, some people disagree, but I still like to think that we're not the stars, we're not the most important bit of the broadcast, and we never should be, but we can really help. And
Mm.
you should notice if we're not there. So I,
Yeah.
I, I I like to think we can enhance what you're watching or what you're listening to. I mean, radio, it's essential because if we don't do that,
Yeah.
there's no point you turning on. Uh,
Yeah.
but TV, you have to earn it a bit more, and you have to justify being there a lot more when you're on TV, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's something really romantic when I think back to radio broadcasters when I was growing up, watching football and then listening to football for the games that weren't on TV. The descriptive nature of that was just like almost like a storytelling type thing,
Yeah.
as opposed to being descriptive. A 45-degree turn and just inside his own half on the right hand side. And you think I can see that, but yeah, I see the difference pretty sharply with the TV stuff. How conscious are you then, in terms of audiences, from a fan engagement perspective, are you when commentating on a game?
I think you always have to be aware of the audience. You are catering towards them, but you have to kind of still stick to what you believe is the best way of doing things. You mentioned storytelling there, and that's absolutely the key to everything we do.
Yeah.
There is a story behind every game, and it doesn't matter what game you have, whether you've got El Clasico, whether you've got Barnet against Stevenage, whatever it is, there's a story there. You just
Mm.
have to find it. And once you found it, you have to show it to people. And whatever the story you started with will not necessarily be the story at the end. So that's the beauty of football, really. Across the 2 hours of a game, you'll have what you started with and those narratives, and some of them will stay the same. Some of them might change.
Yeah.
For example, I very recently did Albert Riera's first game in charge of Frankfurt, which was away at Union Berlin. And that was the main narrative. How would Riera change the team? What would he do in terms of tactics? The stuff that he'd said before, he'd said in the press conference. If I told the players to jump off a balcony, they would do it. We
Yeah.
hoped in commentary that he wouldn't test that theory at any stage. But if something major had happened within the game, that narrative would not necessarily have been the same. So that's one of the things I really love about it, that it can change really, really quickly. In terms of the audience themselves, I've been on social for a while. I've been on Twitter, on X for a long, long time. Lucky enough to have a fair few people who follow me, not huge by modern standards, but a few. And it is nice interacting with people. It is nice debating with people, and you do. I've spoken to other commentators about this, and you can get to a stage where it feels like you're broadcasting into the void sometimes, because you're not. You don't have people in front of you staring right back at you unless you're in a stadium. If you're in a stadium, obviously you do, and that's a different matter entirely. But when I talk to people who say, "Oh, there won't be much of an audience for this, only a few thousand," I'm like, "Well, if you stuck a few thousand in a stadium and put a mic in your hand, it's a different vibe then." So, whatever audience you think you're going to get, whatever game you've got, I treat them all the same in terms of this is a responsibility for the next 2 hours to people at home and people listening around the world. So I think that sense of responsibility is always there, probably.
Yeah, you touched on social media and being pretty prevalent there, and certainly involved from an engagement perspective. Has that shaped the way that you work in terms of, you're now more aware that things are going to be clipped and shared, and you've got maybe more standout moments, I guess, because of just the sheer volume of content that's going out into the public sphere now?
Yeah, I think there's two strands to it. I think I don't change how I do it, in the sense that when I commentate, I'm not conscious of, oh, this will be on social, this will go
Yeah,
viral, this whatever. I don't commentate for those purposes. What I think you have to admit as a commentator, and as a broadcaster in general, actually, is that archive is more important than ever before. And what I mean by that is that when you commentate on a moment, that is going to keep coming back and back and back. And social is a big part of that. It's a big part of that, because, if Harry Kane breaks the record, I've got to be on point, really. If I'm kind of bumbling my way through it, and that's going to get shared and used and whatever, you just hope that you've nailed it and that you've come up with something decent and that people watch it and enjoy it and what have you. So there's definitely an awareness of being concise. There's definitely an awareness. I don't write lines beforehand, and commentators generally don't. What I will do is I will kind of visualize sometimes. So there's a bit of visualization. So let's say Kane's 2 goals away from a big milestone. Okay, not exactly what I'm going to say, but what's the kind of thing I might say? What's the kind of general path I want to go down if he breaks this record, or if he, scores this goal? So there's a bit of thought beforehand, but you are generally just trusting yourself that the right thing will come out at the right time. It doesn't always happen, but as long as it happens most of the time, then you're doing okay.
I was going to say, and you're a football guy at heart, right? So you can get easily caught up in the moment, I guess, and any of the pre-planned or prep stuff that you might have thought about might just go out of the window. If Kane breaks the record with a 35-yard thunderbolt, you might react very differently to if he taps one in or takes a penalty.
If you write the line, it will sound like you've read the line.
Yeah, of course.
That's a very difficult thing to avoid. I think you want the general idea so that your brain takes over. I think that's the thing that people need to remember about commentary, or if they hadn't really thought about it before, think about commentary. You're basically doing 2 hours largely unscripted. If you will script maybe a minute at the top, and you will then be out on the wing trying to balance. Because it's just the nature of the job. You know, you'll have stuff written down. I'll have pages of news lines. I'll have pages of stats. I'll have different things that I think you might bring to the game if a certain thing happens. You know, you want to know what the coaches have talked about. You want to know what players have talked about. You want a little bit maybe of a cool story with a player that's not even necessarily related to football. Because I think that's an important thing as well, that part of the 2 hours really is getting you to understand players as humans. I think, you know, family stuff's important. What are they into? What's their kind of hobbies? You know, as long as you do it in the right way, as long as you're not saying, oh, he wanted to be an orthodontist in the 90th minute when they're pushing for a winner. As long as you don't do it then you're okay. I mean, that's the stuff you know, early. But I think on that score, I was always quite influenced by US sports in the sense that I was always very taken by NFL. I don't get to watch it as much as I used to, but I was always a big NFL fan growing up when it was on Channel 4. And NBA as well. And the thing that really struck me about listening to those guys, you know, whether it was Pat Summerall or later Joe Buck or,
Love Joe Buck.
Some of the great, you know, Marv Albert and like Kevin Harlan later, and, you know, some of the great NBA guys as well. I think you got those stories, and obviously you got a little bit of it from the sideline reporter as well, but you would get those kind of anecdotes because they would sit down with the players in the week before and they would get that stuff. So I've always tried to bring a little bit of that flavor. You can't let it take over, but I've always tried to bring a little bit of that to commentary.
Yeah, we spoke about something similar with Diego Arioja, who's a good friend of mine, does a lot of NFL stuff and obviously football as well, and talking about the kind of storytelling narrative so the audience gets to know him and his relationship with the players, whether it's pitch side or otherwise, in addition to the stats-based stuff that everybody craves as well at the moment. But no, it's really interesting to hear your take on that as well. Do you think, I mean, we touched on the traditional broadcasters that we would have grown up listening to, you know, John Motsons, Barry Davies, those kind of geniuses at work. Do you think that the role has evolved now to be more of a kind of content creator role?
I think I don't think that should ever be the primary idea, in the sense that, as I say, it is because, you know, content is what people want. But what is content? Ultimately, you know, we're doing 2 hours of content every game. Now, some of that will be chopped up and used. You know, highlights go around really, really quickly now. Individual goals will go around. You might have an incident where something ridiculous happens. I mean, Robin Zentner, the Mainz goalkeeper, a few years ago, thought he was passing the ball and he was actually looking at the penalty spot, and he swung his foot through fresh air. And a colleague of mine, Gary Preston, who's an extraordinary broadcaster, he burst out laughing, and his reaction to the whole thing was so genuine and so lovely that I still see that go out year after year after year, and some aggregator will pick it out and go, look at this, the goalkeeper thought he was passing the ball and it was a penalty spot. And Gary's reaction was so perfect. And I think I couldn't have done it as well as he did, because I know what I would have tried to come up with, some quip or some funny line or whatever. But Gary is such a kind of free spirit that his reaction, genuine as a fan would do, just genuine, what is this guy doing? This is hilarious. He kind of shrugged off those broadcasting conventions for a bit and became a fan. So, yeah, that content element is just naturally there now. That's kind of been built up around what we already did.
Yeah.
But in a way, we were always content creators. But I think the way I approach it is the way that I have done for 25 years, which is to do the game justice, do the game first, and then the rest follows on from that. I think if you hit it with the same ideas as you did to start with, I think then the rest naturally flows from that, rather than a goal goes in and you think, this will be on TikTok or whatever. What
Yeah.
should I say? You can't. There's just no way you can do it because you're just in that moment straight away.
Yeah, and you're likely to miss it as well, right? If you overthink it too
Yeah,
much, maybe.
instinct is a big part of it
Yeah,
ultimately because, like I say, it is wing walking. You are out there,
yeah,
and that goal goes in. You have to react. You have to, and
yeah,
you will stumble occasionally. You'll miss your words. You have to be at peace with that a little bit because asking somebody to be 100% clean for 2 hours, it's just not going to happen. I
yeah,
think, I suppose the other side of it as well is that you are a lot more scrutinized now. And
yeah.
social media has given everybody had an opinion before. Now social media means everybody's very comfortable giving you that opinion.
Yeah, yeah, more likely to
So
hear it.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're more likely to hear it. And you have to kind of the thing I always say when I speak to other commentators about this, and we do talk about this kind of thing, not everybody's going to like you. Some people will see it's me on a game and want me fired into the sun. There's no doubt about it. And yet, I've been lucky enough to have people contact me through social media and say, I love your stuff. If there's a game and you're on, I'll watch it or listen to it. And that's
yeah,
lovely. That's really, because in this business, you don't get feedback
right.
generally.
Okay.
You do not, there's no appraisal, there's no regular one-to-one, there's nothing like that. You either get booked or you don't. That's it.
Right.
So if you keep getting booked, you're doing something right. If you're not getting booked anymore, then you're not. So social media has kind of added that extra layer, I think, where, if a load of people are like, this is terrible, you're like, okay, maybe it is terrible. So you
Yeah,
then
yeah,
have to, but then equally, you can't bend to every whim of the people who are listening or watching. You have to have a bit of faith in what you're doing is the right way of doing it.
yeah. I agree, and it's always sensationalized anyway, right? I even see people criticize Peter Drury, who, people campaigned for him to be on Sky for years because he's like the poet of the microphone,
Yeah.
right? And now people are ridiculing him and criticizing him on social media for the stuff that made him famous, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, it makes no sense.
Peter is a lovely, lovely man. That's the first thing.
Mm,
And what I admire about him, and it took me a little while in the job to kind of get it, is that he's unashamedly him.
yeah,
And I think that's really important because he doesn't sound like somebody copying somebody else. If you heard a
true.
broadcast, you would know instantly it was him.
Mm,
And he, the poetry stuff is really interesting to me because you're right. He did that from the get go. He
yeah,
was a wordsmith from the start. He was quite unusual when when he started, and I'm so pleased that he's now, because he's been brilliant for years and years and years.
yeah, yeah.
But he will always be divisive. And what I love is that he's not bothered about that. That's the impression
Mm,
I get, that he's not bothered about being divisive, because some people will hear him do his intro and will love it. And some
yeah,
people will go, "Oh my God, what is this? What is he talking about?" But the thing I guess I admire most about Peter is he doesn't dumb it down. He
no,
doesn't. He hasn't tried to go, people might not understand that word, or I shouldn't do it like this, because he's just done his thing. And I think the people that love it will absolutely adore it. And I'm really pleased that he's done that, because I guess ultimately that's what we're going for. Not in an ego way, but I think you have to do your style.
mm,
I like to have quite a laugh at a joke with my co-coms, not to the detriment of the overall broadcast, but if they're relaxed, I'll be relaxed. We can have a bit of a
yeah,
giggle. I know which ones that I can take the mick out of on air, but you do it in a way that doesn't lock people out. You do it in a
yeah,
way that's not, there's no in jokes, there's no callbacks, there's nothing like that. You have to do it in a light-hearted way that's inclusive for everyone,
yeah,
so people will get what you're talking about. Ha ha, that thing we did
yeah.
3 weeks ago, it's not going to work. It has to
Of
be
course.
kind of much more general, but I'll happily do that. I'll happily throw tactical opinions in. Some commentators are very worried about that kind of thing because they don't see that as their role.
Yeah.
But I've done this for 25 years. I've done thousands of games. If I can't read a game by now, what are we doing? So,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to be told I'm wrong. I'm happy to say, oh, is this why they've done this? And then the co-comment go, no, this is why they've done it.
Yeah.
But what you got to at my expense was you got to the answer
Yeah.
for people at home. So that's why they've gone to a back three. That's why they've, changed that shape slightly. That's why they're keeping possession in their own defensive third to kind of bring on the press and play through it. So
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to get to. And I'm happy to be a kind of big driver in that, really.
Yeah, if you facilitate the end result, that's what you're there for anyway, right?
Yeah.
Enabling your guests to kind of share their insight, whether players or coaches or whatever. Kind of on that, when you're covering leagues like the Bundesliga, how do you, for I guess international audiences, make, let's say, less familiar teams relevant to the audiences, and maybe more importantly, how do you make them engaging? So I'm assuming there's going to be a huge difference between covering Bayern Munich and having Harry Kane and Elise and all those kind of household names, as opposed to maybe a team that's not as well known internationally.
Yeah, I think, again, that comes back to what we said at the top, which is it's about storytelling. There's a story behind every single game. You've got a ton of players, you've got a coach, you've got the history of a club, you've got loads to work with, but you just have to be willing to do it. And you just have to say to yourself, right, I'm on I mean, I did Mainz Augsburg on Saturday, and people would look at that and go, oh, that's a bit grim. I thought it was the biggest game in the weekend. Genuinely. I thought, I mean, I know Bayern played Hoffenheim and they stuffed them 5-1, but that was an enormous game. Two teams that have done a brilliant job in the last few years of establishing themselves at that level. Two teams who made coaching changes which have worked out really well for them. Two teams that are kind of, I mean, this is a reference for people of a certain age, but a little bit like Scrappy Doo. They're small, but they will fight anyone. I'm glad you got that.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. No idea. What is this Scrappy Doo you talk about? So, that's that story. So you have to tell that story with the same oomph as you would talk about Harry Kane.
Yeah.
The Bayern, Dortmund, those games are different in the sense. So Bayern's really interesting, right? So with Bayern, a lot of the time it's actually about milestones with them because they score so many bloody goals and they win so many games.
Yeah.
You're always really conscious of being spot on with milestones because there'll always be something. There'll always be like Neuer's made his 500th Bundesliga appearance or whatever, or Kane's 2 goals away from this, or if Olise does this, it'll be more assists than any Bayern player's ever got in the first 40 games.
Yeah.
There's always a little. So with them, that's what you're looking at. You're often looking at, especially this team, you're looking at kind of those milestones and you're looking at different kind of stories. But there are a lot of similarities. What are the players doing? Is a player out of contract in the summer? Who's talking about that? So, and I suppose actually that leads to another thing that's part of certainly the World Feed commentators' remit, which is with the Bundesliga, we work for the league. And that's a really important thing to remember because the league then, it's effectively marketing to some extent. Now, not in a kind of cynical way, but it's incumbent upon us to show people how good the league is. How this is our league. This is what we love. This is why you should watch. And so within that, you have to be careful about some of the stories that are in there because some of them will be very negative. And you have to, I think we've got a lot better as a league with the Bundesliga in the last few years about being brave at telling those stories. I think when I started over 10 years ago now with the Bundesliga as a client, the Karim Adeyemi story this season about him being found to have had a taser and a knuckle duster, we wouldn't have touched that story. But that was the biggest story in Germany that week. And I said to the editorial team, this is really important that we cover it, but we have to do it in the right way. So it had to be factual. You can't make a comment on his character. You can't make a comment on what should happen to him. You can't do any of that. What are the facts of the story? how do they play in to the overall narrative? And as it was, he scored a brilliant individual goal. And so I was able to say, Karim Adeyemi makes headlines for the right reasons. And that's all
Yeah,
you had to do.
yeah,
But if you hadn't put that context in there, people would go, what's he talking about? So you then have to, have a little bit in there. And if you then watch that on a clip on social, you might go, oh, that's interesting. Right, I'll
yeah,
find out what that's about.
yeah.
So
True.
it works both ways, you see. So I think that's a tightrope you have to walk a little bit, that you can't hit referees really hard. You can't have too many negative opinions. You could say a team's not played well, but you have to then kind of explain why you feel they haven't played well, rather than going, they're garbage again. So
yeah,
you do have to be, and I work for UEFA, and that's exactly the same. And they're even hotter on that kind of thing.
yeah,
This is our product. This is the Champions League. This is very positive, etc., etc. So that can be a bit of a head shift to kind of really think about the way you have to do it.
How difficult is that? I mean, again, as a football guy at heart, you're looking at a referee performance, and I don't like to get on their case too much, but there are some instances where you think this individual's had an absolute shocker. How difficult is it to not comment on that?
You get used to it. You have to. I mean, I'd had that grounding in the Bundesliga that we can talk about. That's an interesting decision because rather than what the hell is he doing? So it's just the language you use, and it's the way that you do it, and ultimately, I think hammering refs is too big a part of coverage anyway. I think I do feel we're in danger with that in the long term, because our kids going to want to be refs? Probably not.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do then? So I do feel a responsibility in that sense. And that I suppose that's relatively recent. In the last few years, I've thought, I hate VAR now.
Me too.
I was pro VAR when it came in, but I'm very much against it now. I think it ruins the experience. I think it ruins the spontaneity. Really, I'm all for offsides. Fine. If it's offside, it's offside. That's an absolute. Obviously for goal line technology, great, but let the referees ref. And I think we've forgotten, I mean, this is a complete tangent now, but I think we've forgotten how good a job they were doing in the first place, to be honest, because the referee accuracy rates were in the 90s in terms of the percentage before we even started this. And I think we've added on a few percent, but what's the cost of that? So I think people look at it and think, well, referees should get everything right because they've got VAR. But actually, I'm glad we've got onto VAR, because that's another thing in commentary. It's interesting. You asked me about viral stuff and whether you commentate for clips. Nothing kills a line like VAR. My God.
No doubt.
Nothing kills a line like that. Because you'll come up with something you think is great, and then it gets torched because there's a VAR call, and they've ruled out the goal for, a tug 20 seconds earlier. And you're like, oh, that's in the bin now. I've got to say something else if he does it now.
There goes next week's booking,
Yeah. So you've then got to be a bit agile with that, and resist the temptation. This is a relatively new thing. This is a thing with social media as well, and the highlights as well. Really resist the temptation to talk about previous incidents, because if a player's had 2 goals ruled out with VAR, right, and then they scored the third, your temptation's always go, oh, well, this one counts finally. But if they've only seen that clip, that's not going to make any sense. So that's definitely been a thing where you've had to slightly change and make it a bit more inclusive for the people who haven't seen the whole game, that you have to kind of just treat it as one incident and then maybe talk about that history in the seconds after the goal, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, for the record, I hate it, and I didn't want it brought in. I love the goal line technology stuff. That's great. It's factual. Offsides I can swallow. My issue from the beginning was you won't celebrate a last-minute winner. And then it went on to be way worse than that. Like you said, going back 30 seconds, 45 seconds in the ground, it's horrible, especially when it just says, we'll wait 5 minutes for this or whatever. You spend 10 minutes looking at VAR and then get 4 minutes injury time is another thing that I could talk about for hours. But
it's players as well. I mean,
yeah,
I think one of the most important things actually with a co-com, and sometimes I do solo, sometimes I do with a co-com. But when I've got a co-com, it's about trying to get in their heads as players when they were there. So we had an incident in that Union Frankfurt game I was talking about, and this is quite a regular thing in German football that you just have to be ready for. There was a massive pyro from the Union fans, like tons of fireworks. You've never seen anything like it.
yeah,
And all the way around the ground, flags came up, and they let off all these fireworks. And the smoke, this red smoke, was drifting across the pitch. And the referee eventually went, I'm going to have to stop this. And so we stopped for about 7 minutes, I think. And I said to my co-com, Seb Kneissel, who's brilliant, by the way, said to him, as a player, how'd you deal with this? Because you got stopped for 7 minutes. You were like properly locked in, ready to start the game. And now you're just wandering around talking
in the
to
smoke.
other players in the smoke. What the hell? And he said people will deal with it in different ways. Some people will want to be chatty. Some will want to stay locked in. Players are trying to stay warm, trying to stay limber, all of that stuff. So that's the co-com's a real wealth of information in that way, because you want to, instead of them just saying, oh, it's a terrible finish, why? What could they have done? What was the idea? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing with the co-com. And it's very it's very topical at the moment to talk about whether top level experience is necessary to make you a really good co-com, and whether caps are important, and whether what your level of experience is. I have a real issue with that, just based on my experience of working with co-coms down the years. I've found that actually some of the most really interesting, engaging, cerebral co-coms are guys that had a good career, but not amazing necessarily.
Yeah.
And not necessarily have even worked in men's football, for example. Julia Simic, who was a great player.
Yeah.
She's a brilliant co-com, because she really will, and all in the second language, by the way. I mean, she played in England, so her English is great, but all in the second language. She's got a real knack of working out, seeing the patterns and thinking, why has a player done this? Why has a coach done this? And Seb Kneissel, who I just mentioned, was at Chelsea at one stage, was at Fortuna Dusseldorf, but by his own admission, didn't have a particularly stellar playing career. He's brilliant. He's so good, because he really thinks about the mental side of it, and he does some kind of self-help stuff with players. He's very plugged into the current scene, so he'll ring up a sporting director, he'll ring up a player. He talks to all these guys. He's connected to all these guys, and you would look at his career and go, "What's he got to tell me?" He's brilliant. He's so good. I would put him right up there with the best people I've worked with.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he just understands how it works. He understands how players think. He's taken the time to really do that part of it. And I think, again, that kind of broadens out your view of, instead of it just being a name and a number, who's the player? Who's the person behind that statistic? And he's great at that. So, and there are guys who've had, Mark Schwartz has had a brilliant career. He's had over 100 caps for Australia, and he's awesome as well. So, I don't buy into this idea that it automatically makes you a better pundit. You can draw on loads of experiences, but it comes down to the same thing as a good commentator or a good player or a good chef or whatever. If you do the work, if you do the prep, if you take the time to really dedicate it to the craft, you'll be great. If you don't, and you rock up and you go, well, I've not really thought about this game. Who's he? It's going to be no good. And I know international players, not ones I've worked with, thankfully, but international players who've worked with colleagues of mine who've turned up and gone, what game are we doing today? So there you go. It's not a guarantee of anything.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And I won't give away too much because I wouldn't say I'll get sued, but it might create a bit of a storm. But we've had, let's say, obviously organising events around the world over the last few years. We've worked with very similar people to what you've just mentioned. Some have had 100 caps, some have had no caps, some have been brilliant, some have been poor, some just want money, some want to do it for the love of the game and money, and that's fine. And there was a high profile person who has been very vocal about this, should we say, and you probably know who that is, who I've actually worked with at events and I would never work with again. Based on professionalism, based on turning up, based on being on time, research, prep, and all that stuff. Whereas if you work with, Seb Bassong's our partner who does the Players Lounge, had a good career. Seb, Spurs, Newcastle,
I was like
Cameron,
Seb, great player, great player.
lovely guy as well. One of the loveliest guys you'll meet, and really good friend of mine as well as been one of our partners. But and he's his black book of footballers that goes from literally George Weah right the way down to non-league players, and it all depends on the individual, like you said. How much do they research? How much do they want to deliver a professional performance? The entitlement thing drives me insane. You can't just. It's very similar for me to. Do you have to have had an amazing playing career to be an amazing coach? No, because if you look at the last few years, the amount of classroom coaches and people that maybe
Yeah,
didn't achieve things at the
absolutely.
top level, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho, the most successful managers of recent times, most of them, maybe bar Pep, didn't have the most incredible playing career. Arteta might
No.
be changing that a little bit at Arsenal now. Jurgen Klopp, by his admission, wasn't the best player. So I think it was all down to the individual, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of that at the game I did at the weekend, actually. A guy called Manuel Baum, who's the coach of Augsburg now. He was a goalkeeper at 1860 Munich when he was a teenager. And he'd always thought, do you know what? I don't just want to go and do a power running session because the coach tells me to. I want to know
Yeah,
why I'm doing it. I want to know what's the idea behind it. So he went away and alongside his football did a double degree in sports science. And,
brilliant.
that kind of gave him a completely different perspective. And as a player, he made no real impact at all, but he went away and went through education. He was a PE teacher for a while, like wasn't a
Right.
coach at all, and then went to Unterhaching and worked for different clubs and kind of worked his way up. And he's kind of coaching because they've asked him to.
Yeah.
And it seems crazy, doesn't it? Because it's a Bundesliga club, it's quite high profile. He only wants to be in charge for the rest of the season because he wants to go back to this role they've got for him at the club in football innovation and kind of coming up with new coaching ideas and teaching ideas. So he's an
Right.
educator at heart. But there are all types of different people that get into football. I think the thing you realise, I'm sure this is the case for you as well, the longer you're in it, you realise that actually the idea you had as a kid that
Mm.
players will want to go a certain way and
Yeah.
players surely they'd always want to join that club or they'd always want to do that thing or they'd always want to, doesn't work like that because
No.
there are players who don't want to leave home. There are players who aren't that fussed about going abroad. There are players who are bored with England, so they'll go out to Spain or Turkey or whatever. There are players who are in it for the money. There are players who are in it for the challenge. There are players who've got 6 kids at home and thinking, right, well, they're all in school. I can't just drag them out of school because I
Yeah.
want to go to Besiktas for 6 months. It's
Yeah.
it's true of coaches as well. Coaches live
Yeah.
in hotels. They live out of a suitcase for God knows when, and they've got their kids at home and their family at home. So the more you do it, the more breadth of experience you have of different things. And therefore, you, as a commentator, you ask better questions, I think. And you think more outside the box about instead of all reacting as to, oh, well, that's a weird decision. Why would he do that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's drill down into why he has done that. And also sometimes you want to put reason and detailed explanation onto stuff that's just not that deep.
Yeah.
Players sometimes just don't like a coach because they don't like him, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some
100%.
players are like school kids and they're
Yeah.
like, boo, we don't like this teacher. It's the same thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a fascinating business, and I think it's
Yeah.
about bringing a bit of that forward sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I find it funny when people always say to me, "Oh, why has that player gone from Chelsea to Arsenal?" and they just completely overlook the fact that he doesn't even have to move house.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he might have been at Arsenal for 3 years, and he gets to move to Chelsea on another 4 or 5 year contract. Like you said,
Yeah.
his kids are at school, doesn't need to move, still lives in a nice house in a nice part of London. The commute might be half an hour longer, but it's not uproot everybody and move house.
It's why Kane was never going to come back from Germany. Initially, people were going, "Oh, he'll do a year or two and he'll come back."
Mm,
Have you not heard anything he said about moving to Bayern? He's always talked about getting the kids settled, getting the
yeah,
family settled. It took him a while to find a house, but he eventually did. And everything he said has been super positive about Germany, about Bavaria, about Bayern, about the people he works with, about company. And the narrative at home was, oh, he's going to want to come back and break the Premier League record. Just
yeah,
listen to what the player's saying. So it's really easy to fall into certain patterns, but when you drill down into what players are actually saying repeatedly in interviews and privately, you pick up some stuff. You can then really tell that story without
yeah.
going along with the idea that, well, of course he'll come back to England. He'd love to come back to Spurs, would he?
Lazy,
So
yeah. Would you?
yeah, that is it. I mean, you know, lazy's a bit catch-all, I guess, but I think that's one of the things as a broadcaster you do have to fight against
Mm,
is perception, cliche, the easy answer. Because a lot of the time, the easy answer, sometimes it is the easy answer. A lot of the time, it's not. And you have
yeah.
to really kind of think about, what am I hearing? What is the general vibe here?
Yeah, I can see Kane being settled there for a long time. I mean, you're talking about a guy that went the majority of his career without winning trophies, which is what they're all in the game for in the
Yeah,
main, right? He's playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, being paid a ton of money, scoring a gazillion goals a season, playing with some of the best players in the world, and it's a couple of hours from home. What's not to like,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
probably easier to get home from Munich than it is to get home from Newcastle if you played
Yeah,
up north.
exactly
So,
that. And Bavaria is beautiful as well. I mean,
it's a lovely part of the world. Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
lovely place for the kids to grow up. And I
And
don't
buying big
know.
long contracts.
Yeah, and
They're not going to force them out.
the love that they've had for him, I think, has really touched him. Actually, I think the
Yeah,
way the fans have reacted to him, and have these fan club visits. They do a ballot, and you get given a certain player. The fan clubs that have had Harry Kane are like, amazing! This is incredible,
yeah, yeah,
and I think that's really moved him. I think he really has kind of embraced what it is to be a big Bayern player, and
yeah,
yeah, it's been a really positive story for everybody involved, I think.
yeah. I agree. I think socially as well, it's very different London to Munich in terms of being able to go around and get about the city. In London, it's going to
100%.
come under abuse from opposing fans constantly and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
nonsense.
Even the winter break. I mean, he had the winter
Yeah,
break and he did an interview afterwards and he said, I had Christmas off. It was amazing.
yeah, but
Like, we forget that and that ties into what I'm talking about. We forget that kind of thing.
yeah,
That how amazing is it for a player who's worked every Christmas all their life, all
mm.
their football life, to get told, oh, yeah, you can have 3 weeks off. What?
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I mean? So, that's a big deal for a player. And it's a big deal for a family man,
yeah.
to be able to hang out with the kids a load of days in a row. So, yeah, all that stuff paints the picture. It's all important.
Yeah, I agree. Is there a moment for you that stands out in your career, I guess, that made you realise that your commentary had an emotional impact on supporters?
I guess when not one specific incident, but I guess what you realize is that when you have a really big moment and it goes around the world and people, are saying nice things about it, then that's always really nice. And I think, again, that ties into that kind of social media element of it. You
Yeah,
don't do it for that, but that is one of the windows where you can see that people are like, oh, great commentary for this or whatever.
yeah,
There have been last minute equalizers in classicas and things like that, quite dramatic moments. One of my favourites is a long range free kick that Naldo, the big Brazilian defender, scored in a Rafia derby between Dortmund and Schalke. It was one of the maddest things. So it was really lucky as a commentator because he was miles out, but I've seen him
yeah,
score this goal so many times. So he's miles out. And the stadium was, I mean, Schalke's a crazy stadium. If
Yeah.
people haven't been and get the chance to go, absolutely go, because it's a brilliant place to watch football. And I just said, can Naldo produce the magic? And he runs up and he smashes the thing into
Oh,
the
beautiful.
corner. And I get to shout, oh, yes, he can.
Yeah.
And then that's the one, you get that little adrenaline spike. And then you know, people are kind of complimentary about the commentary. And then that will end up in, you know, kind of compilations and videos and various things for years. So
Yeah.
they're always nice. If you think you've nailed a goal call and it goes, you know, in a few places. There was one where Kane scored from miles out against Darmstadt, you know, lifted it over the goalkeeper. And I said, this club's built on the exploits of great goal scorers, Harry Kane following in the footsteps of legends. And that you then go back to that and think, oh, that I'm quite pleased with that. And that worked quite well. So you're not doing it for that at the time, but it's nice if they land. And then if they have an impact beyond what you've done and people like it, then that's always nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially if it's an emotive and true reaction from you, like you said about the prep and being as natural as possible, you can look back on that afterwards and go, actually, my natural reaction was a pretty cool one and one that you could be proud of.
And you know, as a commentator, you know, we talk about this bit actually. If you've come off a game and you've gone, oh, I wish I'd done this or I wish I'd said this or whatever, that can happen and does happen. You know, you're always going to be quite hard on yourself sometimes as a commentator. You're always thinking, right, okay, I've said this too often recently. I need to change this. So I will occasionally do myself a little list. If I'm saying magnificent too much, I'll put a big cross through it. Say, right, you can't say that today. I think you're always learning. You're always trying to get better. You're always changing. I was a lot posher earlier in my career, I think.
Right.
I think I was a little bit of a Barry because I would idolise the guy. I think I was always a bit of a Barry Davies tribute.
Oh, I love Barry Davies.
And I listen back to it now and I'm like, who is this posh guy? Because that's not my background at all. You know, working class family in Liverpool. And I'm like, hello. It's like, so, but I think you do over time, like any kind of broadcast, like any kind of creative industry, you find kind of what you do. You know, you kind of amend it and change it and kind of throw bits out and add bits in and kind of are a bit more at peace with it. And your voice changes as well over time.
Yeah.
You know, there'll be a point where the hook arrives from off stage and is slowly dragging me away, and I'll sound a lot more doddery than I do now. But yeah, you do kind of change, and I think it's always quite nice when, I mean, there's guys I've worked with for, you know, years and years and years, 10, 15, 20 years, and they will change and they'll have their own style and they'll kind of develop. So it's quite nice in that way.
Is that as you become more confident in and comfortable, I guess, in the role and you know who you are, or is that just a kind of natural progression thing?
Yeah, I think it's just experience. I think you know, I listen to some of the old stuff and I'm like, oh, that was good. Quite happy with that. And that's like 15 years ago. And oh, that landed. That was good. But your voice changes a little bit. The way you do stuff changes a little bit. But the central idea is always the same, that you're telling a story, that you're doing, you know, that is always the same, you know, the way you try and tell it. It's just different stories, different ways of doing it. But I guess you're always trying to freshen up a little bit. The prep is more or less the same as it always was. I think that's the other thing about commentators, that we do have very different ways of doing it. So guys I work with, like Derek Ray, who works on EAFC, who is, I love that man. He's the nicest man, honestly. Brilliant commentator, lovely guy, has a genuine passion for German football because he studied in Germany, speaks the language perfectly. His prep is like a scroll. You've never seen anything like it. He will handwrite everything, and he'll have this kind of A3 page with everything scrawled on. And Dan O'Hagan, who I've worked with for years, does exactly the same. And I look at that and it brings me out in cold sweats. No, absolutely not. So I do it a completely different way. I have stickers that have, like different lines on. I've got their luggage
Okay.
stickers, so I can stick them in formation or whatever. But yeah, commentators do it in completely different ways. You'll very rarely find two commentators who do it exactly the same way, but you just find whatever works for you and what will make it stick when
Yeah.
it comes to actually do the game.
Yeah, and that's going to enable you to carry off your authenticity as well, right? And you touched on it as well. I've been doing it way less time than you, and I don't plan on doing it for too much longer. But even I've noticed, and my editors noticed, that I say certain words too often, or I used to have a
Oh,
stammer.
yeah.
Sometimes that'll come out a little bit, and I have to correct myself. And then you referenced Liverpool. I'm from East London. Sometimes I used to. Again, working in the advertising industry, I was taught your East London accent's no good. You've got to sound like a thespian. So
No,
it's only now as I'm more comfortable in who I am, and I've been in the industry for, similar to you, 20 odd years or whatever, and my opinion should be valid, I guess, now. So I sound a lot more like my authentic self, which is a mishmash of a Caribbean, Irish, Cockney accent that I grew up with in the 80s and 90s.
which is great. And it's all
Yeah,
communication, right? It's all
yeah.
communication. I think that's changed as well, and I think it's changed for the better. I think it's really good, actually. I think now you will hear all kinds of accents.
Yeah,
James Fielden, who's a colleague of mine, he's a great TV commentator. He's got a real West Midlands accent.
yeah,
Chris Sharples, who I work with, he's got a Northwest accent, really, really good Northwest accent. And you get that range of people now, and it doesn't all have to be clipped RP. It doesn't all have to be kind of,
yeah,
as you say, that kind of thespian idea. You've got to be able to broadcast.
yeah,
You've got to be able to, hit the top moments, and you've got to be able to kind of do all that. But it's quite nice now that you will get loads of different accents from all over the place. And as long as you're clear and people understand what you're saying, which is the name of the game,
yeah,
that's all that matters. Genuinely all that matters. I mean, John Murray's got a beautiful regional accent, like
yeah.
an incredible broadcaster, like that kind of soft lilting kind of
Yeah, I
expression.
enjoy him actually. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's great. So that requirement, I think, has very much gone out the window. It's now very much, can you do the job?
yeah.
And again, it helps you be recognizable. People all hear a voice and go, do I want to spend 2 hours with this person? Maybe not.
Yeah,
Or they'll go, yes. So
yeah.
once you've weeded out all the ones that don't want to hang out with you, then you're okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. Last one to wrap up with you, and I'll let you maybe prep some stuff for the weekend or midweek, whatever you're doing. What advice would you give to aspiring commentators that are looking to build a voice, I guess, that fans would go on to recognise and trust, and to build a credible and stellar career, I guess?
I think there's a few bits, actually. This might be quite a long answer. I think practice to start with. Practice is so important. When I was 13 and made the decision to do this, I used to have a massive silver tape recorder, and every game that was on telly that I could do, I would do a radio commentary and practice and practice and practice. So by the time the BBC offered me a gig, after I'd hung around Radio Gloucestershire for years, annoying them, and they finally said, this guy's been hanging around, we should get him to do something really. By the time they said, can you commentate? I could say yes, because I'd done hundreds of games at practice at home. So that's part of it. You've got to be prepared to go to a local non-league club or go to just get out there, get some experience, try and, we have guys who come in to talk sport. When I do some talk sport stuff, we have guys who come in and do practice commentaries. They'll use the feeds, they'll commentate, and then my boss there can work out if they're going to be any good in the long run. But I think having that get up and go, having that willingness to get out there really helps, because it shows that you're dedicated.
Yeah.
I think knowing what you're getting into is really important. And what I mean by that is, for 10 months of the year, you're a social ghost. Weddings, birthdays, you ain't going to any of it, because you work on a Saturday or you work on a Sunday, and people just, my wife is very, very understanding. She used to work in TV. She gets it. She doesn't always
Oh, good.
like it. If I turn up to family stuff, it's like they've seen a ghost. It's like they thought I died, and I suddenly appear at something, and they're like, "You're real. You're here." So I think you can't rock up late to anything. You can't do a no-show. You can't say, I've got this thing that I have to go to instead. Okay, fine. I'll just ask the next guy or the next girl or whatever. That's how it works. That sounds brutal, and it's not the standard that a lot of other professions are held to, but it's how the job works. And so you have to have that dedication. You have to have that devotion. You do give a lot of time to it. And if you're freelance, as I am, and as most commentators will be, saying yes is really important, because you can only say no so many times. It's probably only when I got into my 40s that I learned to strategically say no now and then. But it's a really hard thing to shake, because your instincts, if you're going to do it well, and you're going to make any money out of this bloody thing, your instinct's always going to be how to say yes and work it out. How do I fit it in? So that's important. But the perks of the job are great. You get to talk about football for a job. How ridiculous. Absolutely absurd to have that as a job. It's the thing I say more often, and I don't say it as a catchphrase or anything like that, but it comes out of me more often than anything else. It's better than a real job. I say this to people all the time. Whenever
there's a clothing line sorted out.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever anybody is moaning about it, I'll always kind of subtly do, it's better than a real job, though, isn't it? And it is.
Yeah.
It really is. I used to work in retail, and I just sometimes, if I'm ever moaning about the schedule, or I've got to do this, or I can't be asked to do this, or whatever, I just put myself back in that shop on a Saturday afternoon, and we're not down the mines. We're not, there's people who do much more important jobs than us. But that's not to say the job isn't hard, because it is. It is. You're asking somebody to basically do 2 hours unscripted with no safety net. And now with social media, you mess up forever, my friend. So, it's a hard job in inverted commas mentally. Obviously, physically it's not, but there's a lot of travel. But it's wonderful. But it's total dedication. Always look to improve. Also, sounds really stupid, but read. Please read all the time. Read loads of different books. Read loads of types of books. Read loads of whatever, because vocab is your friend. It's the best friend we have. And so much of the stuff that I lean on, that I use, that I bring into commentary and highlights and whatever, is the stuff I read as a kid, and the stuff that I learned at school, and you hear it in so many different commentators. Peter Drury was talked about. He's a great example of that. There's clearly a well-read, educated man. And that doesn't mean you have to have a top education to do this job. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is love of language and love of reading I think, drives commentators. I do. I think so. I know the temptation is to scroll, and I do it as well, and everybody does it, and everybody's like, but you have to break out of that a little bit. And it's the only thing, you've got me on one now, but it's the only thing, genuinely, as a commentary fraternity, it's the only thing that's going to keep us alive for a few more years, because it's the thing that differentiates us from AI right now. Because an AI can do a certain average slop job, and it will get better. And there will be companies that go, we don't need that guy, we'll use the AI.
Yeah.
But in the end, AI can't be your style, I don't think.
No, I agree.
Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, I don't know.
I just think it can imitate humans, but it can't be human. And I think that's where you're going to come in. Right? Yeah.
And that's ultimately, that's what we bring to it that a kind of aggregator or AI or whatever can't. It's that human reaction to stuff. It's that passion.
Yeah.
It's that love of what you do.
Mhm.
And again, no, I kind of came up with something at the Bundesliga by accident, really. It was in a workshop, but they talk about it quite a lot. And I'm going to slightly swear now, but only slightly. It's a very
No,
small
you're
one. No game is shit before it starts. You
right.
you you there's the potential in any game, whatever level it is, however rubbish you think it might be, however low profile the teams are, it could be brilliant. It
Yeah.
could be 5-4. It could have a bicycle kick from 30 yards, like Trevor Sinclair. It could
Yeah.
have, as another reference to the kids, it could have the most incredible twist, story, journalistic endeavor within it. So you have to approach every game with like, this is my game.
I agree.
This is it. You know, I never look at the schedule and think, oh, I've got them or oh, I've got
Yeah.
this, because they're all opportunities. They're all, I've done some big games that have been dross. Man alive, they've been awful
Yeah.
because they're similar teams and they just can't, separate from each other. So
Yeah.
that enthusiasm, and again, I go back to that auditorium thing. If you think, oh, this is only going to get like 4,000, 5,000 viewers, stick them in a stadium and see how you feel about it then. So
Yeah.
that's it. Dedication, passion, constant self-improvement, reading, all that stuff. So a nice, concise answer to finish with.
Couldn't have put it better myself, and wouldn't have wanted to try either, to be honest. But no, Kevin, I've really enjoyed this, and funny enough, you referenced you're doing your dream 13-year-old
Yeah,
in terms of what you wanted
absolutely.
to do, and I love that for you. And actually, it was something that I thought I was going to be a player. I thought I was going to captain Liverpool when I was 13. Didn't work out, but I also love the commentary side of it, and my family think I'm a complete weirdo because I spent so many years watching VHS and showing our ages again of the history of English football, the history of African football, the history of Liverpool, and I can still recite those commentary moments now from
Yeah.
games that took place before I was born. Merseyside derbies in the '70s, and I know it word for word. And people like Barry Davies and Brian Moore and John Motson that I grew up with that were just iconic figures. I think you're really privileged in a really great way that you've earned that your words can accompany some of the greatest moments in football history, and I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, we're there to enhance it. If we can,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what we're adding to it. Not everybody will like it, not everybody will want it, but a lot of people will. And they do add to the drama of those moments. And, you look at some like NFL films, the commentary is such an important part of
yeah,
lifting those things. And, some of the great athletics victories there have been, there's great commentary behind them. So yeah,
yeah.
that's what you're aiming for, to just try and take that moment and just lift it and make it a bit more dramatic in people's memories.
Yeah, everyone wants that Aguero moment, right? So, and
Yeah.
I'm sure there's one. There's one in everyone. I'm sure.
But
Kevin,
what a
this has
brilliant
been.
moment that was.
Yeah,
Just on the Aguero thing, that was just pure. He hadn't written a line. He hadn't,
no,
it wasn't scripted. That was just that moment of, oh my God,
yeah,
and then I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again. That was how he felt in that
yeah,
moment. And, Martin's great at that he's able to kind of deliver those moments, but because it's that authenticity, that genuine moment that we're all looking for.
yeah. No, I agree. I've loved this. I could probably do this all day, but I'm sure you've got stuff to do as well as I have. Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time and so much time to talk to us about your career and what you're doing. And I know Helly and our team is a huge fan of yours. I'm going to watch a bit more German football than I might have done before now as well. So this has been Football Business TV, where the game gets down to business. Kevin, for Let's Get Engaged, it's been a joy, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Thanks a lot.